ready to get back into our Father's Word here at the chapel, the fourth book of Moses, the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, in the wilderness in the Hebrew language, the book of Numbers. And, you know, for years, many came to believe that the book of Numbers, the only thing that really went on is the fact that they counted up how many fighting men they had in the nation twice in the book of Numbers. But there is so much more in the book of Numbers, and I hope that as we have worked our way through this book that you've come to realize that we're not just talking about the boring numbering of the people of Israel. There were a lot of events, a lot of types, if you will, even for us, especially of this generation, the generation of the fig tree. As these people of Israel were preparing to enter the promised land, we're preparing to enter the promised land as well. And we see a lot of good information for us as we make those preparations. Now, in our last lecture, we ended with, of course, the beginning of chapter 33. We're going to pick it up today in chapter 33, verse 49. We invite you to get your Bible and join us today. But we left off with Moses having written down where the places of encampment were. And I didn't bore you with reading all that to you, but we went to the map, you may recall. By the way, I meant to mention for those of you who are studying in the future by CD or cassette tape, the map that we were referring to can be found in the Atlas of Bible Lands, a book, a reference work that we offer here at our library. It was on page 10 in the older Atlas of Bible Lands, page 14 in the more recent printing of the Atlas of Bible Lands. So the places of encampment enumerated one by one. Israel is posed right on the Jordan across from Jericho, and we're going to pick it up there today with asking that word of wisdom. In Yeshua's precious name, Father, we ask you to open eyes, open ears this day. Verse 49 of chapter 33, and it reads, "And they pitched by Jordan from Beth Jesimoth even unto Abel Shittim in the plains of Moab." The wandering over. Now it's time to make those final preparations as they are ready to move into the promised land. Verse 50, "And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying," now it won't be long until they make that crossing across the Jordan, and you may be aware that Jericho is the location. Once they entered the land of Canaan, Jericho was their first victory over the Canaanites. Now in verses 51, actually through chapter 34, verse 15, we're going to see God telling the people of Israel what their borders or boundaries are in the land of Canaan. Now don't be confused, this is not the actual division of the land into lots by families, by tribes, etc. This is simply setting out the boundary of the entire nation of Israel, of what land God was giving them on the west side of Jordan. Verse 51, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan." Now this would actually occur in Joshua chapter 3. And when it was time for Israel to cross the Jordan, it was at the flood time. The heavy rains had occurred, and the Jordan was at flood levels. But God stopped the Jordan, and the people of Israel walked across on dry land. Much as the Exodus began as they came out of Egypt, and God dividing the Red Sea so they could cross over on dry land, the Exodus ended as well, with God stopping the flooding Jordan, and they were walking over on dry land. Verse 52, "Then ye shall drive out," exterminate, probably a better word, all the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all their pictures. These are figures carved in stone or on walls, had to do with their religion, and destroy all their molten images, and quite pluck down all their high places of worship. And why would God insist on the Canaanites being exterminated? Keep in mind, we had a second influx of the Nephilim, and there were remnants of the giants, the Geber, in the land of Canaan that had mixed most notably with the Perizzites, but all the tribes of Canaan had some influence of the Nephilim having mixed with them, and the giants, the Geber, were there. God wanted them destroyed. The people of Israel had been pretty fickle about worshiping the Lord, and it seemed like if someone came along with another religion, even if it was someone that they had recently defeated in battle, they were quick to take up the gods, small g, of the other nations. But God's saying here, I don't want you even thinking about worshiping their gods. The first two commandments, Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, you'll have no other gods before me. Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, you're to have no graven images that you bow down to or that you worship. In other words, get rid of them. 53, and ye shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land, and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. In many cases, they didn't have to even plant vineyards or olive yards. It was all there for them. In one place, God said, you didn't even have to build a house. You didn't have to dig a well. I dig the wells for you and give you that land. 54. And ye shall divide the land by lot for an inheritance among your families. And to the more ye shall give the more inheritance, and to the fewer ye shall give the less inheritance. The more people in the tribe, the more land they received. The less people in a tribe, the less land they received. Every man's inheritance shall be in the place where his lot falleth. According to the tribes of your fathers, ye shall inherit it. And of course, the lots would fall upon the Urim and the Thummim, as Eleazar the priest would inquire of the Lord. It was God's decision as to who received what part of the new promised land. And this left, think about it, if that had not been the case, you'd have a lot of jealousy and strife. Oh gosh, I wanted that land over there. That land's got more water than the land that we got. That's just not fair. Well, God decided it. They didn't dare say that's not fair. So that eliminated all the room for strife and jealousy. And God said, well, let's go on and I'm going to explain. 55. But if ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those, these are the Canaanites with a C, which ye let remain of them, shall be pricks or thorns in your eyes, and thorns or stings in your sides, and shall vex you in the land wherein ye dwell. And true to form, the people of Israel would not follow his instructions. They were more interested in making covenants or allies out of the Canaanites or collecting tribute from the Canaanites. They didn't follow God's instructions. Joshua 13:13 documents that. Joshua 15:63 documents the fact that they didn't wipe out the Canaanites. Chapter 16, verse 10. In fact, in Joshua's one of his last addresses to the nation in Joshua 23:13 states basically the same words that God stated in these last verses. If you don't annihilate them, there's going to be trouble. 56. Moreover, it shall come to pass that I will do unto you as I thought to do unto them. Now, that's not Moses talking, friends. That's the Lord speaking through Moses. And as I've already said, they did not wipe out the Canaanites. So some of them did a pretty good job of it, but they didn't follow through and completely annihilate them. And it would take, and what God's saying here is, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to do to you what I intended to do to the Canaanites. So, that's the way it goes. And it would take several centuries for that to come to pass. But think about it. After the nation split, the 10 tribes to the north, Israel went into captivity to the Assyrian captivity that lasted some 200 years, and they were basically removed from the promised land. 200 years later, Judah went into captivity to the king of Babylon, and were completely, for the most part, removed from the promised land. So God did to Israel what he intended to do to the Canaanites because they failed to drive them out of the land. Now, chapter 34, verses 1 through 15, we're going to have the boundaries of the promised land lined out. This is the property that I'm giving to you, is what God is saying. Let's go with it. Verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Moses still in charge, notice, and the Lord speaking with him directly, command the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye come into the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall unto you for an inheritance, even the land of Canaan with the coasts thereof. And the coast you could translate as boundaries or borders, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. In other words, within these boundaries will be the land that I am giving to you. Then your south quarter, this word quarter, check it out, you could translate it as region or extremity. In other words, this is going to be the furthest south of the borders, shall be from the wilderness of Zin along by the coast or border of Edom. And your south border shall be the outmost coast or border of the Salt Sea eastward. The Salt Sea, the Dead Sea that lies at the south end of the Jordan River. So this is the southeast corner of your lands, right there at the very tip of the end of the Salt Sea. Verse 4, and your border shall turn from the south to the ascent of Akrabim, and pass on to Zin, and going forth thereof shall be from the south to Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea, a name you may recall, that is where Moses sent the 12 spies north into the promised land to check it out for 40 days and then come back and give their report. Unfortunately, for the most part, it was a false report. And shall go on to Hazar Adar, and pass on to Asmon. Now, biblical geography is a very controversial subject, and some of the locations being mentioned here are well known, but many of them is a subject of uncertainty at best. And if you're going to line out what the boundaries are, if you're unable to identify with any certainty where the starting point is, how in the world are you going to end up at the right ending point? So my point is, this is interesting to know, but as far as, being like we would do today, send out a survey team to locate where this point is, and then be able to exactly determine the borders of the land of Israel, you'd be hard-pressed to do that. Verse 5. And the border shall fetch a compass, or turn about, from Asmon unto the river of Egypt, and the goings out of it shall be at the sea. In other words, terminating at the Mediterranean Sea is what is referred to here as the sea, the southern boundary running across from the southern tip of the Dead Sea over to the Mediterranean. Verse 6, and as for the western border, ye shall even have the great sea for a border. This shall be your west border, and that probably the most concrete and identifiable of the descriptions that we'll have here, because the coast of the Mediterranean is pretty much where it has always been. 7, and this shall be your north border, and this is the least able to identify where it is, because, as I said a moment ago, you can't even know for certainty where the starting point is. From the great sea ye shall point or mark out for you Mount Hor. Now, Mount Hor, you may recall, a Mount Hor was where Aaron was taken to the top of it, and that is where he passed away. Here, though, that was on the south of Israel. This Mount Hor is somewhere in the northern portion of the land that was allocated to Israel, and therefore is a different Mount Hor, especially difficult to identify today. Verse 8, from Mount Hor ye shall point or mark out your border unto the entrance of Hamath, and the goings forth of the border shall be to Zedad. Now, Hamath is well known where it is today, but this is not the city of Hamath that this is referring to. This is the nation or kingdom of Hamath. Even at the time of David and Solomon, which the nation of Israel grew to the north with economic influence up almost to Hamath, the city, which is north of the Euphrates River, but never at this time that we're talking about did their influence of Israel go that far north, but into the kingdom of Hamath. Verse 9, and the border shall go on to Siphon, and the goings out of it shall be at Hazar-Ethnan. This shall be your north border, the northern border, the most difficult to identify. If you had the phrase Hema of today, would be referred to as and Hamath and other places in the Word. When you said that of Israel, you were talking about the extreme northern border of the land. Verse 10, and ye shall point or mark out your east border from Hazar-Enan to Shepham. Verse 11, and the coast or the border shall go down from Shepham to Riblah, and Riblah being a city in Hamath, the region, on the east side of Ain, and the border shall descend and shall reach unto the side of the sea of Chinnereth eastward. Now this would be the northeast corner of the Sea of Galilee, in the New Testament, also referred to in Luke chapter 5, verse 11, as Lake Gennesaret. And if you say the Hebrew word Chinnereth and then go to a different language, you can almost hear the name as being very close to the same, Gennesaret and Kinnereth. Verse 12, and the border shall go down to Jordan, to the river, and the goings out of it shall be at the Salt Sea. Again, we made a circle here back to the Dead Sea. This shall be your land with the coast thereof round about. Boundaries established, and the most reliable boundaries that were mentioned in this description, bodies of water. But keep in mind, too, that we're talking 3,500 years ago that these instructions were given, approximately, give or take a little. but waterways can change, quite a bit in 3,500 years, especially rivers can change course. Verse 13, and Moses commanded the children of Israel, saying, This is the land which ye shall inherit by lot, which the Lord commanded to give unto the 9 tribes and to the half-tribe. Remember, Reuben and Gad and half of Manasseh asked to stay on the east side of Jordan. The remaining 9.5 tribes will divvy up the land on the west side. For the tribe of the children of Reuben, according to the house of their fathers, and the tribe of the children of Gad, according to the house of their fathers, have received their inheritance, the lands of Jazer and Gilead, remember, and half the tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance, as long as they keep their promise and arm themselves for war and go with their brethren to fight in the land of Canaan. Then they would be free to go back and take their possession on the east side of Jordan. The 2 tribes and a half-tribe have received their inheritance on this side Jordan, meaning the east side where they are at this point, near Jericho eastward toward the sun rising. Now, Manasseh, it's not divided up at this point, but the half-tribe of Manasseh that stayed on the east side of Jordan will end up with the northernmost portion of the land that they're getting on the east side. In other words, the land that the Amorites possessed. Gad will be more in the central, which belonged to the Ammonites, and Reuben, the more southern point, which belonged to Midianites and the Moabites. Verse 16, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, time to choose a prince from each tribe to make sure that the allotment of land is done fairly and equitably. And note who chooses these people. Verse 17, these are the names of the men which shall divide the land unto you, Eleazar the priest, and Joshua the son of Nun. And the Lord is the one who is going to name these individuals. He knows their hearts, he knows their minds. Eleazar the high priest, of course, the possessor of the ephod with the Urim and Thummim, listed first. Joshua listed second as the replacement of Moses, because Moses won't be making the trip into the promised land. 18, and ye shall take 1 prince of every tribe to divide the land by inheritance. The Lord still speaking. And the names of the men are these. Of the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. Caleb, the only one of these that's known already to us because of his exploits as one of the 12 of the spies who went north into the promised land. He was the only one that came back saying, that land is ours, God gave it to us, let's go. And the rest were saying, there's giants over there. They made us look like grasshoppers in their sight. Caleb, selected by our father to represent Judah as the land of Israel, is drawn lots for as an inheritance to the people. 20. And of the tribe of the children of Simeon, Shemuel, the son of Emihud. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. There's no sense in spending a great deal of time. 21. Of the tribe of Benjamin, Eladad, the son of Chislon. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Dan, Buki, the son of Joglai. Verse 23. The prince of the children of Joseph, for the tribe of the children of Manasseh, Haniel, the son of Ephod. And of course this would be for the half tribe on the west side of Jordan. The half of Manasseh on the east side would not be necessary for this prince to oversee the allotment of land, although it could be that he was keeping an eye to make sure that it was done fairly and equitably as well. almost directly across the Jordan from the half of Manasseh who would end up on the east side of Jordan. 24. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Ephraim, Kemuel, the son of Shiftan. Verse 25. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Zebulun, Elizaphan, the son of Parnach. Verse 26. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Issachar, Paltiel, the son of Azan. And these must have been fairly, respected people, although not known as far as other places in the Bible. But God's the one that chose them, so he would know their heart. 27. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Asher, Ahihud, the son of Shilomi. 28. And the prince of the tribe of the children of Naphtali, last but not least, Padael, the son of Ammihud. Verse 29 to conclude the chapter. These are they whom the Lord commanded to divide the inheritance unto the children of Israel in the land of Canaan. And again, Moses still in charge at this point, but the final preparations to move into the promised land being made. With a representative from each tribe, there's no room for suspect of foul play, as this land is valuable, and which tribe ends up where, it's the resources of the land are different in place to place. So now you have an individual from each tribe that God appointed himself, and then consider the Urim and the Thummim are going to be used, so less chance of suspicion on the part of those involved. Chapter 35, we come to homes and land assigned for the Levites. We're also going to see the cities that were known as Levitical cities, cities of refuge, which were called the cities of the priest, and also the laws concerning murder as we work our way through chapter 35. Let's pick it up, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, and you recall the Levites were not to receive an inheritance in the promised land, just as the elect, known as the Zadok in Ezekiel chapter 44, are not to receive an inheritance in the promised land, because God is their inheritance. But the Levites have to have a place to live, and that's what's going to be being discussed in these first few verses. Verse 2, command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in. And ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them, and not suburbs as we think of them today. What this is talking about, and we're not going to give a whole city to the Levites, but as you, the tribes of Israel, receive your inheritance, you are required to provide sufficient number of houses from your cities to the Levites assigned to your area. The suburbs, it's not what we think of a suburb today as houses around a major city. The suburbs were actually rural land where the Levites could keep their herds and their flocks. They had substantial herds and flocks as well, and obviously you'd have to have pasture land for them. Verse 3. And the cities, and we'll see that these are larger cities because they're all walled, shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle and for their goods and for all their beasts. Now, land and pasture also allocated to the Levites. Now, in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 34, we learned that these houses that were given to the Levites, that was for eternity. A Levite, and sell is really not a good word. A Levite could rent his house that was given to him in one of these cities. Example, if he was in one of the cities outside of Jerusalem and he was called to Jerusalem to serve there for a long period of time, he could lease out his home. But it could be redeemed at any point in time, and every Jubilee, every 50 years, it went back to the Levites at that point, irregardless. Verse 4, and the suburbs of the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites shall reach from the wall of the city and outward 1,000 cubits round about. In other words, if you went, and we're talking walled cities here only, larger cities. So if you went to the very northeast corner of a city wall, and then you measured north 1,000 cubits, and you measured east 1,000 cubits, we would be diagramming the line, the land that's going to be allocated to the Levites. Verse 5, and ye shall measure from without the city, in other words, each corner of the city wall, on the east side 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, and the city shall be in the midst, or in the middle. This shall be to them the suburbs of the cities. And if that's difficult for you to follow along, take a piece of paper and just draw a square or a rectangle, which represents the city that we're talking about here. Go to each corner and draw out whatever measure you have. Let's say you draw and you say, okay, this is 2,000 cubits for the city wall. And you go to each corner then and you draw out 1,000 more cubits in each direction, both directions. That then, if you look, you would be then drawing the squares or rectangulars of the land that would be designated to the priest round about. The size of the larger the size of the city, obviously the more land that the Levites received to put their herds and flocks. Verse 6, and among the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites, there shall be 6 cities for refuge. This word is miklot in the Hebrew, and means asylum, which ye shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither, and to them ye shall add 40 and 2 cities. They'll end up having 3 cities of refuge on the east side of Jordan, 3 cities of refuge on the west side of Jordan. In addition to those, you have 42 other cities where the Levites are distributed. If you had all the Levites in Jerusalem, they wouldn't be able to do a very good job of teaching the people about God's rights and His laws. And you know, it's interesting to note that they're going to be distributed throughout the land of Israel, because if you go back to Genesis chapter 49, you have the blessings of Jacob upon the patriarchs. There's also a curse there, and that curse was upon the Levites, on Levi, because of what? Well, Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, back in chapter 34 of Genesis, was raped by Shechem. And what did Levi and Simeon do? Well, they went to Shechem and said, hey, what are you guys doing here? And then Shechem asked his dad, well, I love that girl Dinah. You get her for me to wife. And Levi and Simeon kind of pulled a little covert activity there, and they said to Shechem, okay, yeah, I'll tell you what, you guys, you know, it'd be a good deal. You know, you could take our daughters to be your wives, and we could take your daughters to be our wives. There's just one little problem, and that is that you guys aren't circumcised. So I'll tell you what, if all of your men will circumcise themselves, and we'll just share the land together and share our daughters and can take each other to wife. Well, they thought about it, and they all decided, well, yeah, it's a pretty good deal. We'll do that. So they all were circumcised. 3 days later, it states in Genesis chapter 34, while they were sore, S-O-R-E, that Levi and Simeon came upon them with the sword and killed them all. Jacob put a curse on Levi for aggravating the natives. When there's only a few of us, you're going to make all of our enemies mad at us, and they're going to come and kill us. and therefore the curse in Genesis chapter 49 on Levi was, you will be scattered among your brethren of Israel. And that's exactly the way it came to pass. A curse turned into a blessing. Got a short message. We'll finish up this book of Numbers as we come back in our next lecture. I ask you to listen a moment, won't you please?